Good evening. Welcome to Good Work Now. Today we're going to talk about the new purchasing. And think about it with your own company or your own business practices. Where is purchasing in your organization? Sometimes it's buried somewhere in some other department like finance or maybe manufacturing or operations. And think about it if you ever went to business school or think about the MBA programs. Purchasing is sometimes embedded in some economics class or maybe it's part of a finance class, but you never see purchasing in and of itself as a standalone career, course, function, or department in an organization. And given what we're going through right now with trying to be as savvy as we can with our finances, it seems to me that there's a need to think about this whole thing called purchasing. So we're calling the show The New Purchasing. And I'm very pleased to welcome to our show Omid, and he has done some very innovative work with this area of purchasing. He has 15 years of Fortune 50 experience as a senior manager with broad experience in purchasing operations management. He is also adjunct professor at Folsom Lake College, where he has pioneered an innovative purchasing management program, the first of its kind in California. He is also the president and chief consultant at Purchasing Advantage, a purchasing corporate training and solutions provider. And Omid, thanks so much for stopping by today on Good Work Now.
Thank you so much for having me, Brian. I appreciate it.
And this, some folks might think, oh, purchasing, how boring is that? But this is, I think, I'm not a purchasing person, but I think this is very exciting that you're onto something very unique here. And I think this is very timely that all of us think about, not just for our own personal purchasing power and savvy, but also business-wise. And so today we're going to talk about this new purchasing, and why it's important as a potential new career, and how it can help your business, and how it can help you personally. And let's start with the first question. What are your thoughts about purchasing? Let's start there.
And what is purchasing? So purchasing is really about the acquisition of goods and services at the lowest total cost for an organization.
Okay.
And it's really important to understand this concept of lowest total cost. It's very different than acquisition price. If you've ever bought a car and noticed that the landed cost or the total cost of owning that car was very different than what the acquisition price was, that gives you an idea for total cost. When we have purchasing within an organization, traditionally it used to be purchasing clerks, so people who had less experience, less education, who were simply placing purchasing orders, and that's really changed. And now what we're looking at is looking at what the demand is within our organization for what sorts of different things, aggregating that demand into commodity areas like site services, construction, information technology, consulting, and this can add up to millions of dollars in major organizations, firms, and agencies. Then having buyers who are very focused in those areas, or commodity managers who are very focused in those areas, understand the industry as well as the suppliers, are able to identify the right suppliers, take that demand and identify the right suppliers, be able to put contracts in place, do the cost analysis on that, recognize both the business and legal risks, put those contracts in place, execute towards the lowest total cost for the organization, maximize the company's profit, and really focus on then managing those suppliers to ensure on a continuing basis we maintain the lowest total cost advantage to the company. And corporations are just now starting to recognize this business advantage by really driving and investing in purchasing.
So is the days gone where purchasing is more of a generalist function? It's becoming more of a specialist function, would you say?
Especially for the larger organizations.
The larger the organization, the more that you need commodity specialists.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because once your expenditures get so high, you can't afford to be a generalist anymore.
Okay.
You really need to be very focused on a particular area of the business and be very versed in that particular technology, in the industry, in who the top suppliers are, what the economic trends are, what the supplier trends are, and understand every facet of how that industry operates. Until you can do that, you can't effectively negotiate with a supplier and expect to get the best pricing and the lowest total cost.
Right, you're going to really need to understand the players out there.
Absolutely.
For you to be able to leverage the best deal for your
Absolutely.
organization.
That's what it comes down to.
Okay.
And again, I want to emphasize it's not only about the deal, but it's about ensuring that you receive the lowest total cost for the organization. And that's really, purchasing looks very far ahead in doing that. In how we select suppliers, how many suppliers we have, what sort of things we purchase. We might modify the demand that's coming to us. The customer might say they want one thing, and we might change it, for the good of the organization, in concert with the customer, to ensure that we're doing the right thing for the stockholders for the company, or for the taxpayers if it's a public firm, as an example.
So clearly this notion of purchasing is becoming more of a strategic function in an organization or a business.
Absolutely.
Speak more about what your thoughts are about how this is a strategic function.
Well, these things are really going to change, and the internet and computers are enabling that as well. Whereas before, in the past, the mantra was purchasing is going to place the order. Then it went to purchasing is going to help us lower the price. Then it went to purchasing is going to help us reduce total cost. Now, the new mantra is about supply chain management. And what that really refers to is looking down not only at your supplier, but their suppliers, and then looking not just at your customer, but their customers, and looking at that entire chain.
Oh, that's what that is. Okay.
Absolutely. And if we can establish, and very few companies have done this well, but we're on the road, if we can establish a glass pipeline of information on inventory, on demand, on capacity, on all sorts of things like that, lead time, on cost. And if instead of going to a supplier and saying, give me a better price, if we can look at this supply chain and work with all the partners and find inefficiencies in the chain and find costs that we can take out of the chain that shouldn't have been there to begin with, nobody loses in that transaction. Because suppliers don't like to just be told, reduce your profit margin. Right? But they're okay with having a discussion, and the supply chain is okay with having a collaborative discussion with how can we do this smarter? How can we take costs out of the supply chain for the benefit of all of us? It's not about reducing profit margin. It's about being more competitive. And what's going to happen is in the future, it won't just be the firms trying to be competitive with one another in an industry. It'll be supply chains, and it'll be a battle of supply chains, and those with the best supply chains will win.
So it's expanding beyond the myopic perspective. Okay, I'm going to buy this set of goods from you, the supplier, but I'm looking beyond that in terms of like who's your supplier, there's and so forth, that whole chain.
Absolutely.
So you're looking at it more systemically, more broadly, and so maybe a purchasing person in this new role of purchasing is more of a leader in trying to bring all the players together, and how do we leverage this for a win for everybody?
Absolutely.
How interesting.
It becomes a very critical role, and I want to emphasize this is not easy to do because it requires systems. It requires systems that talk to one another, so to speak, to establish that glass pipeline of information. In the interim, there's things that companies can do in terms of sharing information up and down the pipeline. And if you look at companies that do this well today, for instance, I'll take Walmart. Their competitive advantage comes not just from what they do, but what their supply chain does and how they design that, and how they've been able to take a lot of costs out of the supply chain, which is very different than telling your suppliers, make less money so I can make more profit. That's really a win-lose proposition. Win-win is when you can take costs out of the supply chain and work collaboratively. Walmart has done that, and nobody is able to match them today with their supply chain practices, which is really driven by their purchasing organization.
Isn't like Costco a similar kind of process where they've cut out some middle steps, and that's why it's cheaper because it's direct warehouse to customer kind
Absolutely.
of concept?
They've established a lot of supply chain type practices. Of course, they have other factors that have enabled their success. One is obviously economies of scale and purchasing in very large volumes. Another one is very much limiting the various types of items they buy. So instead of offering 20 types of toothpaste, like you might find at the supermarket, they might offer 3. And so they aggregate their volume down to 3 vendors, and they're able to get better pricing as a result. And their shipping and logistics becomes much easier because there's fewer vendors involved for getting that sort of toothpaste. That all results perhaps in a little bit less choice for the customer and the end user, but they're okay with that because as a result, they get a much lower price, and it's a win-win for everybody in the supply chain.
Actually, the reason I'm smiling, I have in my pantry 26 cans of chicken of the sea tuna. Because I've had 3, and I got 26 left, 26 cans more to go from Costco, because you buy the bulk, and all they had was like 2 choices, chicken of the sea or Starkist or something.
Absolutely.
What is the forecast for purchasing careers and jobs? And as I mentioned at the opening, purchasing has been this collateral function of maybe business analysts or financial analysts or program analysts, but you don't see purchasing typically as a career, as a major or a minor in academic environments. So what are your thoughts about where that's going?
Okay, so absolutely, we need more visibility. We need people to get excited about purchasing as a discipline, and we need academia to support us better. Major corporations do have purchasing departments, but typically they're hidden underneath finance, underneath operations, underneath manufacturing. I think someday we will have chief purchasing officers in organizations. That's part of the Holy Grail. As far as in terms of what the forecast is, if you look at our Sacramento County and the 3 local counties adjacent to us, the EDD is forecasting about 1,017 jobs over the next 10 years. That includes new and replacement jobs. That ranges from things like a purchasing clerk where you have little experience, it's on-the-job training where you can expect to make about $34,000, that's an average figure, up to purchasing managers where you would expect to have a degree in business or a related degree, as well as some experience in purchasing, and on average they make about $81,000. So certainly the opportunity is there, and I think because it's a recession, companies are investing in this, and they recognize that we cannot afford to overlook purchasing. We're not going to, sure we have to cut in many areas, and purchasing may get some cuts, but we can't afford to cut them too deeply because they are going to be our lifeblood. It's not just looking at marketing to help us generate revenue and looking at accounting to help us count the revenue. We need somebody to help maximize the profit, and purchasing is there to help us do that.
Isn't that interesting what you just said, that we've elevated these other functions like accounting or budgeting? Absolutely. But procurement which has so much potential for the bottom line, is... Any thoughts, Omid, about why it's been buried all this time? Why it hasn't had the same stature as the others?
I think there's still a monkey on our back, so to speak, from the old days of purchasing when there was purchasing clerks, and their job was just to place an order and make sure that we received those goods and services as quickly as possible. So that legacy perception still kind of exists, and corporations have been quicker to change, especially the purchasing organizations, and those that they immediately report to tend to really recognize that value. But if you switch over to academia, academia has been very slow to recognize this value and to respond and to train people in the field of purchasing and support.
Let's talk a little bit about preparing for a purchasing career in this new paradigm that you're talking about. And I know you've done an innovative job with creating some kind of program. So speak about how to prepare for this and a little bit about the program that you developed.
Sure. The first thing I'll say is, in all my years of working with purchasing professionals, I've never actually met one, Brian, that said, this was what I chose to do. I was in college and I knew I wanted to pursue purchasing. Every single purchasing professional I know landed there by accident. It was a kind of a baptism by fire sort of thing, and they just ended up there. They don't know how they got there, but they enjoyed it. And the old joke with purchasing is, it's the best job because you get to go shopping all day and spend somebody else's money. The reality is a lot more complex than that, but it's a fun joke to say. In terms of preparation, the first thing you can do is, certainly education is a good route. Not all institutions are behind. There's a couple of very prestigious purchasing institutions. One of them is Michigan State University. The other one is Arizona State University. You can even get a doctorate degree in purchasing from those, or materials management from those institutions. But the vast majority of institutions have little to nothing to offer from a purchasing perspective. And if I take myself as an example, I received a bachelor's in business and a master's in business from California state institutions and did not hear the word purchasing mentioned when I graduated. And so that gives you a sense for where we're at. I've developed a 18-unit purchasing certificate program for the Folsom Lake College. And pending budgetary situations, that will be launched in fall 2010. Wow. So we're very excited about that. And anybody who takes that series of 5 courses, I feel, will be very well suited to land in a field of purchasing, and will have more preparation than anybody I've ever met coming out of college, in my opinion.
And how did you base that curriculum? It was benchmarking Arizona and Michigan, what they're doing with their program?
There are a number of institutions throughout the United States that offer some sort of purchasing certificates and so forth. And this is either the first or second in California. Yeah, I'm still trying to validate the other source, but it's innovative. And considering California is the world's 8th largest economy, we cannot afford not to have this as a focus area.
Should be an interesting thing to ponder is how much money the state would save if it maybe had a chief procurement officer or a chief purchasing officer thinking about all the money that we spend and the budget woes that we've been through for several years. Is there a national purchasing professional association?
Absolutely.
There is, okay.
Yes, the most well-known one is the Institute for Supply Management, formerly known as the National Association of Purchasing Managers. And they are a global organization of purchasing and supply managers, supply chain managers, as they call themselves. They produce, aside from meeting as an organization and trading industry best known methods and having seminars and things like this, they also provide very vital statistics to the federal government and reports and things like that about how much is being purchased and how the economy is doing from a purchasing perspective and so forth. And so they play a very valuable role in that perspective.
Okay, and is there a local chapter in Northern California?
Absolutely. Sacramento chapter.
Sacramento chapter, okay.
Absolutely.
And many of our viewers are small business owners in the area. And as you probably know, the vast majority of our organizations in the country are small business. About 98% of all businesses are 100 or less employees. And any thoughts, Omid, about how people can leverage their own purchasing power, even though you're a small business? Maybe you have generalists. Maybe you have one person who's your purchasing person. They do it all. They do the solicitation of bids, and they process the order, and they do the inventory or whatever it is. Any thoughts about how people can be more savvy and more strategic?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, it is tougher when you don't have the volume. There's no way to overcome the fact that your purchasing volume is very, very low.
Okay.
But some of the things you can do is learn how to do cost analysis, learn contract law a bit better, and most importantly, I think, learn how to negotiate, learn how to create competition with other suppliers, learn how to do a bidding process, and learn how to keep yourself legally safe and really protected. Having contract language in place that protects you is really important, because you might get a good price on something you acquire, but if you don't have the right contract language in place, your total cost may go out the window post-purchase. And so those are some of the skills that can be acquired. Certainly that can be acquired by something like the certificate program that we just referenced.
I was just going to ask you, where can folks get some of those skills? So one would be the certificate program at Folsom Lake College is going to start next fall.
Fall 2010.
Is there any place in the interim folks small business owners can go to get more knowledge or more skill about how to do some of those things that you mentioned?
Well, the Institute for Supply Management does offer courses, and they offer courses for non-members as well. And the admission price is a little bit higher, as you would expect. But those, if you go to the ISM, or Institute for Supply Management website, or look them up on Google, you can certainly find out about courses being offered locally as well.
Okay.
I think that's a great source.
Okay. And now let's move to the personal dimension. What thoughts do you have about how we can be more savvy with our own personal purchasing power and our own family or household financial management?
Sure. I think being experienced in purchasing, having gone through the experience of knowing how to manage total cost, how to calculate and do cost analysis, knowing how to do negotiations, knowing how to achieve your negotiation objective while leaving the other person feeling good about it, are some very, very powerful skills. Also knowing how to read contract language. I know from a personal perspective, nobody can put a contract in front of me that I don't understand. Nobody can pull the wool over my eyes, never again. And I remember prior to my purchasing career, I signed a lot of contracts where I didn't know what that fine print meant. And now I have a very clear understanding of what I'm getting into. From a cost analysis perspective, it really helps in terms of any kind of personal acquisitions that you wish to make, or from a household, if you're calculating retirement income or other sorts of things. Really having that ability to just open up a spreadsheet and do some forward-looking analysis is a pretty sometimes forgotten skill, and it's good to really brush up on that. The purchasing background and experience really helps with that. From a negotiation perspective, it really doesn't matter what you do in your day job or whether you work at all. We all negotiate every day, be it with our spouse, our significant other, with our children, with our neighbor, with schools, whatever it may be. You're negotiating every day. And the ability to negotiate and the ability to learn some of those skills, and some of them are very behavioral, is critical.
And I think in today's current economic situation, I think a lot of suppliers are very eager to be flexible. Like maybe a contractor comes, maybe you've had 3 contractors come to your house to give you a quote for your kitchen remodel.
Absolutely.
You know, which is one of the things you want to get competing quotes and see what might be the best deal for the best dollar. But then you negotiate with that lowest bidder perhaps that, gee, you know, how about we do this? And
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So it becomes really critical being able to do that. But how many times have we selected the lowest bidder and then realized that we got what we paid for and it was a poor job and we're really not happy about it? That's where the concept of total cost comes in, and the savvy purchasing person doesn't fall for that trap.
Okay.
They write the contract, they either qualify the supplier and understand exactly what it is that they're getting, but they also write the contract in a way that is absolutely laser tight.
Exactly.
So that there's no escapes, no excursions. You know what you're getting, and if you don't get exactly what you stated, it is a breach of contract.
And actually, I've heard stories, horror stories about folks who've done some kind of home remodeling or something, and they've had some kind of project manager, and they went with the lowest bidder.
Absolutely.
And then they're, you know, a year later, they're still working on it. You know,
absolutely.
like, because there's that quality issue, the qualitative issue. I mean, it's not just the money sometimes, but is it the product that you want?
That's right.
When you want it.
It comes back to total cost, and it comes back to knowing how to write a contract. Okay, and purchasing people learn how to do that so that they know exactly what they're getting and there's no excursions.
Exactly. Any final thoughts, Omid, about purchasing? Let me ask you this question: Why do you have a passion for purchasing, and what's that all about?
Because I feel like it is so. When I first started in purchasing 15 years ago, I immediately saw the value, and I was shocked that I didn't study about it in school. I was shocked that I didn't know anybody else who was in purchasing. And I was shocked that it's not discussed more on the same level as marketing, accounting, operations, finance. It's not even in the discussion. And since then, I've been on a personal crusade. I've taught over 1,500 hours of purchasing-related courses all over the world, really teaching about total cost, contract analysis, and things like this, and how to negotiate behavioral and database negotiating skills. And I have a passion for this discipline. I want people to get excited about it. I want academics to get excited about it and get behind it. And my beta test is with Folsom Lake College. I'd like to see this to fruition, see it be successful, and I'd like to see other colleges adopt it. Then we can have a pipeline of students who are ready and don't land in purchasing. It won't be baptism by fire. It won't be I landed here by accident. But
very intentional.
Absolutely.
Is there a certain type of person that is well suited for this job, do you think? Or is it really anybody could do purchasing?
You know, that's a classic debate. Some people say that purchasing negotiators are born, not made. I really think they can be made. I think it's, if you had asked me before, I would have said, I'm really not sure if I'm suited for this. It's, I think once you get into it, it's, first of all, I'll say it provides a lot of gratification. At the end of every day, you can clearly state, and not all jobs are like this, that this is how I added value. I reduced this much cost out of the supply chain, or I introduced these suppliers, or I brought this much better quality. And you can really have a tangible assessment of what difference you made, and that really feels good. If nothing else, that feels good. And the carryover to one's personal life is tremendous. In some ways, it's liberating. Being able to receive a contract in your personal life and know exactly what it means. Not at all.
Right, because you understand the Greek, the language, legalese, and all that sort of thing. Right.
So there's a passion I have, and I hope other people.
It's coming through, and I really appreciate you sharing it today with